Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires, and today I am very excited to have with us an Oscar-nominated documentary filmmaker, Mr. Stanley Nelson. I want to tell you a little bit about this gentleman before we get started. Stanley Nelson is today's leading documentarian of the African American experience. His films combine compelling narratives with the rich historical detail to illuminate the underexplored American past. A MacArthur Genius Fellow, Nelson has received nearly every award in broadcasting, including 5 Primetime Emmy Awards and Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Emmys, the Peabody Awards, and the International Documentary Association. In 2016, Nelson was honored with the National Medal in the Humanities from President Barack Obama. Nelson's latest film, Attica, with Tracy A. Curry, on the 1971 prison uprising, which premiered as the opening night documentary at the 2021 Toronto Film Festival and is now streaming on Showtime. In 2020, Nelson's film Freedom Riders was added to the National Registry from the Library of Congress. In the same year, Nelson's 4-hour series, Vick, about the complicated life and times of former NFL quarterback Michael Vick, premiered on ESPN's 30 for 30 to rave reviews. In 2019, the film Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool, became Nelson's 10th Sundance premiere and first Grammy nomination for Best Music Film in 2020. Nelson's other recent features include the Emmy-nominated Tulsa Burning, the 1921 Race Massacre with Marco Williams for the History Channel, and Crack Cocaine, Corruption, and Conspiracy, a harrowing look at the crack epidemic of the 1980s for Netflix. With his wife, Marcia A. Smith, Nelson co-founded Firelight Media, a nonprofit organization that supports and develops nonfiction filmmakers of color. Firelight Media's Documentary Labs has supported over 100 filmmakers whose films have premiered in theaters and on broadcast, cable, and streaming platforms. Their films have won Emmy and Peabody Awards and garnered accolades from festivals and critics alike. Please help me welcome my guest today, Mr. Stanley Nelson. Stanley, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It is indeed an honor to have you here to speak with me today. And I want to talk about your Oscar nomination. I know that is a big deal in this industry. And I just want to get your thoughts and feelings on this nomination.
Well, it's an incredible honor and to be nominated. You know, it's the first time I've ever been nominated. In a long, over 40-year career making films. So, they don't come often. It's just an incredible honor that we're nominated. And I think for the film Attica, it just means that more people are going to see the film, and then that's a great thing. That's what we really want. The nomination is great, but the fact that more people are going to see the film, that's what's really important.
Yeah. Well, I did see the film, and I really, really enjoyed it. But there's no but as opposed to. But what I'm going to say is that I enjoy your body of work. So I just this morning decided to watch Miles Davis, The Birth of Cool, and I've been a jazz musician pretty much my entire life. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, as part of a very rich jazz legacy in the Indiana Avenue area, as it was known to be. And many of the musicians that came out of there went on to great things. Of course, the Wes Montgomery and Freddie Hubbard, but also J.J. Johnson, who did work quite a bit with Miles Davis. Right. And so I'm familiar with the jazz scene, but I must tell you this. I grew up as a young trumpet player. And of all the different trumpeters, Miles Davis was probably my least favorite. And I mean, the Dizzy, the Freddie Hubbards, Maynard Ferguson, Chuck Mangione. I mean, I just go on and on. Clifford Brown. But there was something about Miles that did not appeal to me. And my confession is this: I watched that documentary this morning on Miles Davis, and that was the first time that I had felt like, and maybe it's my being older and a level of maturity to be able to really understand, but you painted such a compelling picture of this complex gentleman, but it all seemed to make sense to me. And so I have grown in just the last 3 hours in my appreciation for the great work of Miles Davis. And I want to attribute that to you, sir, because you opened my eyes to many, many things about Miles that I did not understand. And so thank you. Thank you for that, because I'm in love with Miles Davis now. I can't wait to listen to some more recordings and get on top of that. So,
Yeah, I think that
I
Miles Davis, occupies a real singular position in jazz. There's nobody that bridges, the world of Charlie Parker and bebop, and goes on to, be instrumental in every jazz movement pretty much after that, and all the way up to, kind of really inventing the idea of jazz fusion. So,
mhm.
Miles is a singular individual. But also, as you were speaking, I don't know if you know that my mother is from Indianapolis.
Oh, I
Yeah,
did not know
and my
that.
family is from Indianapolis. Yeah, yeah. My mother's side of the family. My mother's maiden name was Ransom. So if you know any Ransoms,
Oh, absolutely. The connection with the
Walker.
Madam C.J. Walker.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's very, very interesting. So so your mother is one of the ransom
yeah. Her
is of
father,
the
my grandfather, was Madam C.J. Walker's business partner and lawyer. Yeah.
wow. Wow. The world gets smaller as we speak. So that's fantastic. So I understand you were born in New York.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So what was the migration from Indianapolis to New York?
My mother went to college at HBCU Talladega in Talladega, and then after Talladega, she went to Columbia University for library science, and ended up in New York, and where she met my father, who was from D.C., and they got married and stayed in New York.
Okay. Okay. Wow. I did not know that. So I want to jump to right now. You've got a huge body of work, and there's a number of connectors, oddly enough, that I was able to put together. I mean, I want to talk about 1989. You wrote and produced and directed your first documentary feature, $2 and a Dream, the story of Madam C.J. Walker, the nation's first self-made African American female millionaire. And then in 1999, you produced the Emmy nominated documentary Black Press Soldiers Without Swords. And then in 2000, Marcus Garvey, Look for Me in the Whirlwind. Um, 2003, The Murder of Emmett Till. And that won several awards, including an Emmy for Best Directing for Nonfiction in the Sundance Film Festival 2003 Special Jury Prize, and the George Foster Peabody Award. Um, what's significant here is, in addition, the Justice Department, as a result of this film, the Justice Department reopened Emmett Till's case and reopened that investigation, citing the presence of new evidence exposed in Nelson's documentary. That's something. I mean that's huge. Which takes me to a couple of other points here, which is how does social justice, I want to start there. How does social justice factor into the work that you do?
Well, I think that when I started making films, when I first went to film school, I think it was probably 1974 or 73. We're just
Mhm.
coming out of the civil rights movement and the Black Panther era, the Young Lords era, and so many social movements. And for the first time, African Americans were getting into making films. And I thought that that so many of the fiction films that we were seeing, were fictions, like The Mac or Superfly or
Mm.
Blackula, and that they were films that really weren't about much. They were fun, and it was fun to see black folks in front of the camera. And but I thought there was something else that to be said and to be done uh with film. So I mean, it's hard to understand, but when I was a kid, growing up in the 50s and 60s, you didn't see black people on the screen hardly at all. Black people weren't on TV at all, and
Right.
so when black people started to be kind of in front of the camera in the 60s and the 70s, I thought it was a real kind of sacred trust, like, okay, well, now we're in front of the camera. Let's try to get behind the camera and and
Mm.
and make these films about something, about the lives that we lived, and about what our real lives were for African Americans. So in many ways, I came out of the movements for social justice, and the fact that film could be used to change things, and could be used for a higher purpose than just showing films about pimps and prostitutes and drugs and stuff like that. There was something else
Right.
that could be done. And I
Yeah.
mean, and I just want to be clear. I don't think that everybody has to do it. If you want to make films about drug addicts and drug dealers and pimps and prostitutes and money and whatever, then great. I mean, the film world and what's portrayed on film and African American lives, are a huge spectrum. So I don't begrudge anybody that makes films about whatever they want to make.
Hmm. So, what is it that inspires you to become interested in a topic or a subject for a documentary film?
Well, I think that it's more things than one that have to inspire me. If anybody kind of says, "Oh, I was inspired by one thing, and I went out and made a film about that and raised money for years," it's probably not really exactly the truth. So I think
Right,
one,
right.
so I made a lot of documentary films about African American history and American history. So let's take that for an example. I think one of the things that's really important for me is that it's a film that can be made. Like, are there witnesses, or is there footage, or letters, pictures? Something that helps me to be able to tell the story. Two, I want to make sure that for me, it's an important story. One, because Madam C, $2 and a Dream, the story of Madam C.J. Walker, took me 7 years to make. And then the next film I made, and I thought that $2 and a Dream, it was a big film. I thought, hey, we're on our way. The next film that I made took me another 7 years to make. The Black Press, Soldiers Without Swords. So if making a film is a deep dive. You never, it can take a long period of time and of your life to raise the money and make the film. So I think that for me, it's got to be something that's good, that's important. So that 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, I just don't say, forget it. Like, you know, like
Right.
I think that's not important. So it's got to be important. I think the other thing I want to try to do is make films that help me as a filmmaker grow, and also that don't kind of stop my career dead. So that it's like, oh yeah, well, that was a good film, but so what? I want to make films that I can take to you or anybody else and say, okay, watch this, and you see, what my work is. So I think it's a number of different things that need to kind of click in place for me to realize that, or think that this is a great topic for a film.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned sort of career killers just a second ago, and I mean, what in your mind would be that type of project, which would be the last project?
Well, I mean,
Look,
look,
is it?
I'm at parties or some people's house, so for dinner or whatever, and people will come up to me and say, I got a great idea for a film. It's like about my uncle or my grandfather. He was the first postmaster general in Roanoke, Virginia, and I'm like, I mean, really, that's really a good film topic for you? Like, I maybe I'm not good enough as a filmmaker, but that kind of topic doesn't kind of seem to be that it's not that filmic. So our last films were like the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, about the Black Panther Party. Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool, about arguably the greatest jazz musician ever, and by any standard, one of the greatest musicians of the 20th century, the most important
Sure.
musicians of the 20th century. You know, yeah, we just did a film for Netflix a little while back about crack. The crack epidemic. So I think that these are in many ways important subjects. They're big subjects, um, and in many ways, they're filmic. There's something that like we were able to tell that story.
And more universal scope or larger appeal. I mean, is that
Yeah,
accurate or am I?
I think so. But there's all different ways to make films and all different kinds of films. It's just bottom line, is this a good story?
Mm,
And can you tell it? That's the criteria. Is this a good story? And am I the person to tell it? That's really um, what I'm looking for.
yeah. So, of course, there are the documentary film genre, and then there's of course feature film and all that. Your thoughts about the the difference or the comparisons between how these things can as vehicles to tell a story. I mean, because obviously we've seen feature films that also have tackled historic significant events and that sort of thing. So just what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's a different perhaps business model. I mean,
I mean, I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
just two different ways of telling stories, and in many ways, we're using some of the same tools in documentaries, and the tools that we use in documentaries keep being expanded, there's animation. There's another film that's nominated for the Academy Award that's all animated, as a documentary.
Mm,
It really just depends. I think that really, it's the same thing in many ways. But I think one of the huge differences, and that people kind of are recognizing about documentaries, is that for documentaries, by and large, don't offer the same kind of payday at the end. Like, people don't
mm,
make documentaries usually to make money. They make documentaries because they're passionate about the subject, or they feel that the story needs to be told, or some other way. But you're telling this story not to have a huge payday at the end. And so much of fiction filmmaking at this point, not all fiction filmmaking, but a lot of fiction filmmaking, is for no other reason except to make money, finally. And obviously, anytime you make a film, there's a certain amount of craftsmanship that goes into it, and artistry that goes into it. But the bottom line, when you see a movie about superheroes, is that they're there to make money.
mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Have you ever had a particular desire? Is there that story that you went, hey, I want to do a feature film on that? Anything like that? That's
Um, I would love to do a feature film. I'm probably getting too old now. It's a lot of work. I mean, I went to film school. And when I went to film school, I was really thinking about making fiction films. But I kind of fell into documentary film. I got a job with a African American filmmaker named William Greaves, and he was kind of one of the leaders, first African American to kind of have their own company and make films. And at that point, he was making documentaries. So I was happy to have a job, at a film school,
right.
I started making docs, and you know. But I mean, I thought about it for a long time. But I think at this point, uh, I know how to make docs. I don't know how to make fiction films, and it's probably something that is not going to happen.
Okay. So, and it's certainly not necessary to happen. I mean, you're doing fantastic work. I mean, I can't begin to express that any more than I have. You also did a piece on Jim Jones, and there's another, oddly enough, an Indianapolis connection. Jim Jones started his church and was born here in Indianapolis. That's a story and how he moved that church from here to San Francisco and then beyond. But
Yeah, when we
uh,
made the film, we actually found people in Indianapolis who had grown up with him, who knew him as a boy in Indianapolis, and it's really chilling because they talk about how kind of weird he was and would kill small animals and things like that, and we actually found I think it was just audio tape of him preaching in Indianapolis. So,
as a child or as a
no, as an adult, that
okay.
from his church in Indianapolis, we found that audio tape of him preaching that we used for a little while.
Wow, incredible. What are the challenges that are facing blacks in the film industry? I mean, what are the unique challenges that they face, and what are the unique benefits?
Well, I think that the challenges for African American filmmakers are many. I mean, filmmaking is expensive. At the very least, filmmaking is expensive. And you can cut the costs. But it still costs a lot of money. To give an idea. Like typically, so like a film like Attica, we might have paid between $200,000-$300,000 just for the footage. That we use just for the archival. And that's not counting the money for the interviews and all that stuff. So raising money is always a problem, and still, I mean, the gatekeepers, that can green light a film, can fund a film, are so many times, white folks. Yeah, and it's they it's kind of like my wife and I have a joke, like they kind of say, I don't know, there's just something about that guy that I really like, when a white guy goes into their office. I don't know why, but I really trust him. I think that we can work with him. And you don't have that as a black person. So and also so many times they want to say that they and then they honestly feel that our story is in a niche. It's like well this film might appeal to black folks, but that's not enough, or that's not as an important story as some of the other things. So those are some of the challenges, and just being able to be recognized, and to get your films made, and then once you get your films made, to make to have the gatekeepers, from the festivals and other things, recognize that this film is important. So like the Sundance Festival, there were 10 films in the documentary competition this year, and so, you know, do they recognize that this film is important? Do they recognize that that film is important? But the gatekeepers again over there are the vast majority of them are white, and they view their films, even if they think they're being fair and honest, they're viewing their films through the white gaze.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in our relative period of wokeness, whatever that is, there seems to be, the craze of when corporate has that little shot in the arm where they start to say, hey, we need to lift this up. This needs to be the thing. I mean, is it different today for black filmmakers? I mean, in this narrow window, is there an opportunity or seem to be a receptivity today more than when things are whatever the status quo is? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think things got slightly better after George Floyd and people marching in the street and so many other incidences of violence. I think that a certain amount of people, some people, said, oh my God, some people really. I mean, and this was in all honesty. Some people looked around, their company or their whatever, their edit room, their newspaper, their whatever, the TV station, and said, "Oh my God, there's no black people who were working here. I never even looked at it, or there's only one or two, So I think that for a time, that happened. We'll see, like how long, that continues. So I think, but I also think that part of the the change has been, the streaming services, have gotten to be so, powerful. So like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and ESPN and HBO, they have to fill their airways. You know what I'm saying? And they don't
right,
have to get the kind of ratings that the networks used to get. The networks don't even have to get the kind of ratings that they used to
right,
get. And so
right,
instead of saying, okay, we've got to appeal to whatever, 40 million people or whatever they get, it's like, okay, well, wait, let's get some black folks, and the model is very different, so Netflix doesn't care. Netflix doesn't have advertising. HBO doesn't have advertising. All they want to do is make sure that there's enough on the air so that if you want a certain type of program, you buy that service and you don't cancel it. So what I mean is, like if you watch HBO, has boxing every once in a while, right? And the
hmm
boxing fans got HBO. Now they don't care if they get everybody, so Netflix, has, all of the streamers now, Netflix and and Hulu and Amazon, that they have, like if you scroll down enough, you find like, oh, black lead, and then it's all films and shows with a black lead, or Black History Month, and then they have all these films, or black films, and
right, right.
and then they don't have to make the payday. On the other hand, it's kind of the death of movies and movie theaters, because it seems like basically the only thing that's making money are superhero movies, and those movies, have to, they have to, they spend over $100 million. They have to get a lot of people in the seats. But then again,
hmm
you think about that, and you think about the Black Panther Marvel movie, that shocked everybody because it made so much money, and it was so good. Um,
hmm
I mean, I think that, look, nobody actually knows, like like whatever they think in movies, that they have the formula, right? It proves to be that they're all wrong. If you told somebody that
right,
that
right.
one of the five films that would be nominated for an Academy Award would be a film about a prison rebellion, that happened 50 years ago, with mainly black prisoners, they would have said you were crazy. But here we are.
Yeah, I think it's very odd too. I mean, just as the internet, has challenged the existence of magazines, newspapers, so on and so forth, has done exactly the same. What it's done to the music industry is nuts. Napster just gutted it, and people in the music industry are today still trying to figure out how in the world they make money
Right.
with music, because you don't have albums anymore. You don't even have CDs anymore. It's just like a download, and it's uncertain. And
Yeah, yeah,
you
but
know,
on the other hand, hopefully people will figure it out because people are listening to more music than ever, right?
right,
I mean, I know for me, Spotify, is like a dream come true. Like Pandora is like a dream come true. I
sure,
listen to a lot of music, and I listen to music all the time.
hmm
Sirius XM, the jazz station, just stopped yesterday, but they had a whole Miles Davis thing. Like 24 hours a day, they were playing Miles, or people who played with Miles, or people who reinterpreted Miles Davis's music. And basically, I listened from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. Now, it's a really sad case that for most musicians, it probably hasn't been a good thing. But hopefully at somehow, some way, it'll be figured out because people are listening to more music
right.
than they ever did. You know,
Right. Yeah, it's fantastic from the consumer side because we're not paying for these recordings anymore. I mean, so we're getting getting the playlist, but yeah, the monetization piece as far as how the musicians are faring is still a up for
right,
grabs kind of thing. It hasn't settled itself. But interestingly enough, the same things happen with the feature film industry and the theatrical release versus the streaming thing, which is a subject of several big old lawsuits here recently. And again, I guess my point is how that internet and how we would look at a Hulu or a Netflix as major motion picture studios now. That to me is I'm still trying to wrap my head, trying to get used to the idea that the what we considered, the models of what network television is, what cable television is, what theatrical cinemas are. The line is so completely blurred anymore. It's hard to tell. I mean,
yeah.
you
Well, I
know
mean,
what I
I
mean? It's
think the other thing that added to that, adds to that is the pandemic, and we don't know, how movie theaters are going to come back or if they will. So in some ways you just got to wait and see. I mean, you do miss something, about going to the movies, buying some popcorn and seeing the film up on the big screen. There is
mm-hmm.
something that's missing. Is it enough missing for you to pay, end up paying like $50 or whatever, when you buy, two tickets and some popcorn and maybe parking and, some sodas and blah, 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 and, $50 probably pay for, 4 or 5 months of Netflix.
Right, right,
So,
exactly,
like,
exactly.
does it make sense? And for people, like me and my age and uh, you know, um, I'm not gonna, I don't really care about, superhero movies. So, you know,
Right, right. Yeah, it's amazing just how the industry and how the rules and the players are changing by the day,
yeah.
and just where these markets are kind of pop up, and then you go, man, they look like they're here for the long haul. I mean, it doesn't look like so it just changes. It's a major transformation, probably similar to radio shows to television or
Right.
film to television. It's just yet another phase of the evolution of media
Right. I mean, I
and
know for
entertainment.
documentary films, it's in many ways has been a good thing for some people, and that those people are, I'm included, because I have a track record and I'm a proven entity. So we've got work for the next 10 years or something, I mean, literally,
Hmm.
and that's great. But, we also run a documentary lab where we work with first time filmmakers. And, many times they're suffering, because they make, they go through their sweat and blood and, anything they can do, they make a film, but, the powers that be, the Netflix, Hulu, Showtime, HBO, ESPN, kind of don't recognize them, because they've only made one film, and they're not that proven entity that can go out and make another film. So they call this the golden age of documentaries, and it is the golden age for many, many, many people. But it's
Hmm.
not for it's not across the board. It's not even, and it's not for it's not all people. But documentaries are being recognized in a way that they haven't been, most of the time. People are seeing documentaries as films that are, people are much more committed to. They're not there just to make money. They're really kind of interesting. You see a documentary, on a streaming service, and it's really good, and then you say, honey, let's watch a documentary tonight, and let's get away from that
Yeah.
the crap of people swinging on webs and stuff like that.
Right. Right. Well, it's very interesting. So now Attica, Attica. I did watch Attica and was intrigued by it. Um, again, the depth of the coverage. And ironically, just recently, I did an interview with the documentary team of Emily and Sarah Kunstler on their film "Who We Are" with Jeffrey Robinson,
Mhm.
and that was something I was grateful to speak with them because their father, William Kunstler, was one of my heroes. I've always been a fan of sort of those figures who defied the odds or stepped in and accepted cases that nobody else would, impossible sort of circumstances. But as a civil rights attorney,
Mhm.
had tremendous respect for his conviction and how he showed up. And at Attica, again, William Kunstler, leading the delegation into that prison. There's another gentleman who was a part of the Attica delegation, the Reverend Marvin Chandler, was one of two or so black ministers that accompanied that group into Attica prison. And Marvin Chandler is also a jazz pianist and is a good friend of mine. Happens to still be around, and I've spoken to him. And it was interesting. I was speaking to his daughter. Marvin's well in his 90s now, and I was speaking to one of his daughters, and she just shared how that the experience of Attica changed him, just changed him, like from that day forward. It had such an impression where he was in there sincerely knowing that they were up against it, but he tried and certainly hoped for a different outcome. But I think it was the experience because they got trapped in there, I guess, when the shooting and this stuff went down. And he spoke of stepping over the bodies and whatnot when he was leaving, and that just almost took his legs out from under him. And so that Attica story is a very powerful story and a necessary story. And like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And what are your takeaways from making that film? Your own personal takeaways from that experience of now looking at that very closely. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think this, the story of Attica, is so many things, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to make the film. It's
mhm,
it's about the powerless, and nobody could probably be more powerless than inmates in a prison. But it's about
mhm,
powerless, saying enough is enough, and fighting to be treated like human beings. That's that, on one level. It's about the power of the state, and the lengths that the state will go to exert itself, and to uh, keep control and gain control. It's about in many ways the political ambitions of Nelson Rockefeller and Richard Nixon. It's about the casual racism of that permeates the film. From the guards who are up on the tower shooting through of old style video camera, and are talking about, that's the biggest, blackest, ugliest Negro gentleman I've ever seen. To after they retake the prison and kill almost 40 people, law enforcement laughing and joking about it, and putting up their fists and yelling white power. To Nixon's first reaction when he's told, of what happened, he congratulates Nelson Rockefeller on what a great job he has, and his next words are, "Was it the blacks? Was this whole thing led by the blacks?" And then he says, "Were any white people killed?" What he's saying is kind of, were any real people killed? Were any white people killed? And it's about all the pain that everybody suffered. The prisoners in Attica, the hostages and their families who were also slaughtered. The great pain that you see from the negotiators and the news people who went in, that they could not prevent it. They tried for 5 days, to negotiate a peace, and that it ended up, in more horrible in a more horrible way than anybody could have imagined. So it's about so many different things. And I think that's one of the things that has made the film resonate with so many people, because it's horrible, but also that uh, it's also about the humanness, um, of the prisoners, and you see from their testimony that there are human beings, and they're so great in the film, talking about the way they were treated before the rebellion, during the rebellion, the first few days, the exuberance that they felt, because they were out in the yard, and they kind of were making their own rules, and they were free, at least kind of free for a minute there, at least not under the repression and the horridness of what was happening in Attica. So, I think there's so many different lessons to be learned. By the story of Attica.
It's a fine piece of work, sir.
I
And,
think
when I think about documentary filmmakers, I mean, of course, we look at someone like a Ken Burns, so it immediately pops into mind because he's somehow garnered some level of commercial acceptance or commercial appeal or positioning from the industry. I don't know. And I mean, he does his thing. So in the documentary film industry, I know that at least in feature films, I mean, Spike Lee and some of these guys still have real challenges coming up with financing to do projects. And is this the same type of thing that exists within the scope of the documentary world? I only hold up Ken Burns because if you ask someone, about a documentary filmmaker, that's probably the only name that they could come up with. I mean, because it's just, Ken Burns does jazz, Ken Burns does baseball, Ken Burns does Civil War. So it's like these very epic and huge, relatively huge budgets, I'm sure, in order to create that level of work. So is the financing and the ability to come up with the support, the funding, is it the same? Is it different
well, I mean,
for people of color, or does it, or is that the difference?
I think it's different for every filmmaker. I mean, I think Ken Burns is at the very top of the
Mm-hmm.
heap. And so I think that he doesn't have the problem, certainly, of a Stanley Nelson, but other people would say Stanley Nelson's in the next tier. and certainly he doesn't. Stanley Nelson doesn't have the problems of that I do. So I think that a documentary film costs money, it usually means going to a third party or a fourth or a fifth or a sixth, to raise money. Usually people don't have the money in their pocket to make these films, and so that I think, I think for some people, it's gotten better. Look, when we try to hire, editors and producers and other things for our films, a lot of people are working. A lot of people are working, and it may they may have a lot of problems, getting their own film off the ground, right? But they're being a lot of times they're being hired by the Ken Burns or the Liz Garbus or Stanley Nelson or Alex Gibney or whatever. So hopefully, they'll launch more careers as producers and directors, and that's certainly what we're committed to at Firelight Films and at Firelight Media, is trying to get more people of color in the industry, and calling their own shots and making the films that they want to make. And as we always say, paying their rent and buying their groceries, through their filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. The work that you are doing as it relates to encouraging and being able to bring on young aspiring documentary filmmakers and to mentor them and to try to work with them, and that is incredible, because like I say, I mean, I think that there are probably many that will become more and more inspired by your work and want to try their hand at telling stories. It- so how does this? It's interesting because in the day and age of all the stuff in opposition and craziness as it relates to CRT or the telling of bringing Black history in to be a part of American history, the challenges in that. So I would imagine, as a documentary filmmaker, there is a bit more. Again, as I was talking about social justice from the very beginning, there's an importance to this kind of work and being able to tell these stories that not only is for the sake of an entertainment or just an inquiry into, but I think that they hold weight because they are history. They are history, and I think that that's something that documentary films uniquely bring to the table, and hopefully they'll be around so that other people can see them in the future or access them. Yeah, I think it's just very, very important work. I remember having a conversation with Julie Dash and her Daughters of the Dust and some of the work that she's done, and similar conversation with Michelle Mater and some of these folks. So um, I've always been a fan of documentary film. Uh, I prefer them over just entertainment film. I mean, if I've got downtime, I'd rather learn something than just, kind of uh, uh, garner some entertainment for a minute. It's nice to be entertained and challenged also with something that is real, and to walk away with something that you didn't know before you sat down. And that's a very unique piece that I think documentaries do, at least for me and others. So again, uh, your work is without question some of the best work in the industry, and it's nice to see you being recognized by the Academy. And sir, I wish you nothing but the best
Thank
on this year's award ceremony. I look forward to it, and I'm rooting for you.
you. No,
I'm rooting
thank
for
you.
you.
Thanks.
So what's on the horizon? Anything that you can share as far as projects? So you say you got 10 years. You got 10 years of hard time already in front of you. So
Yeah, we've got
uh,
an hour long film about documentary film about Harriet Tubman, and another hour on the first half of Frederick Douglass's life that we just finished actually, and but they're not going to be out until probably the fall on PBS. And we've got a number of other things that we're just kind of starting up, you know. So yeah, we've been waiting to do a film on the transatlantic slave trade, and we've been kind of on hiatus for the last 2 years because, and we've actually raised the money to do the film, the vast majority of the money, but the film is, you know, uh, we got to film in Africa, we got to film in Brazil and the Caribbean and Europe, and we just gotta wait until things open up and we can travel. So, uh,
Yeah.
but I think probably in the summer, we're gonna try to figure it out. We're gonna either figure out how to film without traveling, or we're gonna figure out how to travel. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. You mentioned transatlantic slave trade, and that immediately brought me to mind of my good friend Thomas Norman DeWolf, who is a part of the DeWolf family out of Bristol, Rhode Island, and I believe to be the largest slave trading family in U.S. history.
Oh.
And I believe that documentary is called Tracing the Trade. It's a documentary, and then he wrote a book called Inheriting the Trade, which is
I've seen it.
incredible. So he leads an organization now called Coming to the Table, which brings together descendants of former slave owners and former slaves in dialogue. But anyway, that's fantastic work. And I look forward to, again, this year's Oscars. And again, I'm going to be rooting for you. And I wish you nothing but the best, brother. You do fine work. And,
Thank you.
And I hope this is not the last time that we are able to have a conversation.
Hopefully. Thank you so much.